Thank you. Okay, hi everyone. First of all, my apologies. I blame Brooke there for putting Dr. Uri Klarman everywhere, not just Uri Klarman. So I'm Uri Klarman. I'm the CEO and co-founder of BlocksRoute Labs. And we're called BlocksRoute because we route blocks. Now, before getting into that, I would like to start with a Jewish saying which I really like. Rivalry among scholars expands wisdom. So in this talk, I'm going to talk about our findings about scalability, and I suspect that most of you are going to disagree with me, and that's perfectly fine. But hopefully, by the end of this presentation, then those who still disagree with me will also benefit from me pushing against their arguments, maybe strengthening the foundation of their arguments, because it's worth having a discussion even, and maybe especially if we disagree. So let's start with the bottom line of my presentation. The bottom line of my presentation is that the only thing that matters for this in terms of scalability is the networking layer. And why do I say that? Because we took the Bitcoin code and we deployed a Bitcoin network of our own. We deployed something, or over 300 nodes all around the world with 30 miners, and we allowed them to do relatively large blocks, usually between 50 and 100 megabytes every minute. And that network works. That network processes over 1,000 transactions per second. And the only thing we did in order to make Bitcoin scale is using BlocksRoute at the networking layer. So the networking layer is the only bottleneck for scalability. Okay, it's not about storage, it's not about CPU, it's not about even bandwidth, which is at least related, and it's not about the number of non-mining nodes. The only bottleneck to scaling blockchains is at the networking layer. So my game plan for this presentation is, let's start by talking about what is the bottleneck, and then let's move to talk about what's not the bottleneck. So let's start by talking about the networking bottleneck. Bitcoin today processes 4.2 transactions per second. Okay? If it wants to compete, it wants to scale and remove financial middlemen like credit card companies or banks, well, credit card companies are processing over 5,000 transactions per second on average. They peak way higher than that, right? Just Alibaba peaked at 325,000 transactions per second. So for those 4.2 transactions per second are not going to cut it. So why can't we just increase the block size by a factor of 1,000, right? What is the bottleneck that prevents us from scaling blockchains? Well, in order to answer that, let's first talk for a second about what is a fork. And when I say a fork, I don't mean Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, hard fork kind of thing. A fork is what happens when two blocks are mined at approximately the same time. A lot of people refer to that as an orphan, but orphan is the result of it. Eventually, one will be accepted and the other will be orphaned. But before it is resolved, then you have a fork in the blockchain. So it could be that one miner mined block A on one side of the world and start propagating it, but before it reached everybody else, a different miner mined a different block, block B, on the other side of the world. And it started propagating from there. And now we have this ambiguity, right? Half of the network think that block A is the tip of the blockchain, and half believe that block B is the tip of the blockchain. But that's fine, because forks are a natural part of how blockchains work, right? Once the next block is mined, let's say on top of block A, the fork is resolved. Everybody will accept it as the longest blockchain. Now, these forks only happen naturally during the block propagation time, right? If I am a miner